Powder is the smallest size of colored glass available and can be very versatile when used in the creation of artwork. Powder is made by crushing frit in a ball mill. When used like frit, the powder is rolled through, and the heat of the gather is enough to melt the color onto the surface. Powder can also be sifted onto the outside of a bubble or gather to create various densities of pigmentation and shading. The application of different color powders can create both abstract designs and naturalistic color patterns, such as the skin of animals. Powder can be melted smooth or left dry and cakey on the surface of the piece.
So we have this set up in the front. This is something I haven't quite described yet, but this is a large wooden board that we have laid out. There's a little bit of wet newspaper on top of it, mostly just to protect the wood and also kind of create a layer of steam wherever we touch the glass down. So using this, we're applying an even pressure across the entire piece all at the same time, so it's mostly just for symmetricality, and we'll use it for things like cylinders or cones like we are right now. And our next heat, we heated up mostly just the bottom of the piece so you can really see the glass glowing all the way on the end. And this is to allow us to just work with that one section instead of altering the shape of the entire piece. So we went in with the wooden paddle and flattened the bottom completely. This just gives it a nice place to rest on a flat surface such as a table. And next we have a pretty big step. We'll bring over another pipe with a little bit of clear glass on the end as an attachment. And we'll attach it right to the center of the bottom of the piece. And then we'll completely break this piece off of the pipe it's on right now. And for those who just joined in, I just want to share real quick that we are making some crackle vases. If you stick around long enough, you'll be able to see the whole process of how we get the color and how we get the crackling pattern on the surface. But we are getting onto the shaping part. So we've already made the lower half. We'll work on the upper half next. So we're using a small shard of broken glass to scratch the bottom. And this is just giving us a bullseye or a target to hit when we bring over the second pipe. And that punty has just been attached. Punty being this secondary pipe we're basically using as an attachment. We're waiting for it to kind of stabilize or set up. And then we'll apply some water to that divot we created in the very beginning, which is right next to the pipe. That's called the jack line, by the way. We're using the jacks to create that line. So we're going in with that water now. This is cracking the glass from thermal shock. So when we tap the pipe, that sends a vibration through and into those cracks, and it pops the piece right off. So now we have basically flipped the orientation. We'll be able to start working on the top of the vase. The previous ones I saw, they had a little bit of a flared out top, almost like a little disc right around the opening. So we might see that same thing with this piece. So we've heated up maybe the front third of this piece. We're just wanting to work on the opening. We have the overall shape we want already. And what we'll do with most blown pieces is we'll trim some excess glass off. That area where the glass was connected to the previous pipe tends to be a little bit thick, and sometimes that break isn't perfectly even, so we will cut some of that excess off using a pair of shears. So now we're at the point where we can just perfect the shape. This is where they would flare the opening out or just kind of fix it up to make it perfectly symmetrical and pointed at the very top. Oh, looks like we're trimming just a little bit more glass off. So we're going on the inside of the piece with the jacks now. Once again, these two metal blades. So it looks like with this one, we might be leaving it just perfectly straight and symmetrical all the way through, so we aren't doing any flaring. Oh, if anyone's curious, by the way, these wooden paddles, we're mostly just using them to shield the artist's hands and arms from the heat that's radiating off of the glass. We're not exactly using them to touch up against the glass for the most part, although we do use it, of course, to flatten the bottom, maybe smooth things out every now and then. And to finish our piece off, we'll break it off into these Kevlar gloves, apparently same material as firefighting suits. And then we will probably torch the bottom and then stamp it with the Museum of Glass logo. This is something we try to do for all of the store pieces, just to make sure that people know where it came from. So after applying a little bit of water and then a tap of the pipe, that piece has broken cleanly off. Once again, we're just torching it and then stamping with the Museum of Glass logo, and this piece is completely done. So let's give them a round of applause for finishing that vase. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the annealer, this large black box, and we have to let it sit in here and just stay warm. Eventually we'll press a button and it'll slowly cool it overnight. And that slow cooling process is really important. It's going to prevent thermal shock. So we won't see that piece again until tomorrow. I think the cycle is about 12 hours. And yeah, once again, we're going to see them do the same process again. We're just using a variety of different colors. And we'll start our next one over on the left bench. I'll be able to walk you through how we get the colors and the patterns. Yeah, so this is kind of a continuous process. The glass artists that work on the floor each day, no matter who they are, they always try to take advantage of the time they have because we only have a certain amount of time to make our pieces. So we're hopping right into the next one. So surprisingly, rarely do these artists get to work on their own work. I think technically they can come in when the museum is closed, but at that point they're burned out from doing it all day, every day during the week. And yeah, sometimes they will have artist residencies and they'll be able to partake in those themselves. I know over the past couple of years that I've been here, I've seen each of them make their own work at some point, which is nice. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of them, they've been working here almost since the museum opened, if not since the museum opened. We do technically have kind of a not permanent full-time employee on the floor right now, but he's a local artist, Trenton Kyocho. He's the one sitting down at the bench. And I have talked about him a lot actually before because he's been a visiting artist. He was on the Netflix show Blown Away, and yeah, he just has a lot of experiences under his belt. But But yeah, all of them are working for the museum at this moment, and usually that entails making things for the store. Sometimes they'll be helping visiting artists that come through. I would say that's more than half of the work that they do. Yeah, the artist residencies are huge because artists get to come in for free, basically. All they have to do is bring in their own color, and these guys will help them make whatever they want. They don't even have to necessarily work with glass to be a resident artist. So we've already started off with the color overlay process where we've dropped that molten color onto our clear bubble. We've pushed it, rolled it back. We're just expanding that bubble a little bit before we move on. And this is when we'll start building up some mass for the piece. We'll start gathering some layers of clear, eventually move on to that powdered color, as you guys might remember earlier, and then we'll crack the surface. Also, if anyone's curious, these pieces that are on the front pedestals, these were made by the Hot Shop team as well. We just finished something called Goblet Week, which was, of course, an entire week of goblet making. And the resident team here, people that work full-time at the museum, they were working on goblets on the last day of Goblet Week. So I think it was this most previous Sunday. And yeah, these pieces are really complex. They have something called cane inside of them. This is specifically a twisted cane, so it has these twisted lines of color, almost like lace, in my opinion. These ones are very intricate. Also, this is something we did with the glass earlier as well, but I forgot to point it out. This is a strip gather specifically, so we call these gathers, these layers of clear, but a strip gather is specifically when we drip or strip some of the glass off to give us a partial layer of that clear, just getting us closer to an exact size really more than anything else. Also, we have these metal tables throughout the hot shop in different places. These are marbers, and we'll use them to shape the glass, sometimes cool the glass, because of course whenever we're touching the hot glass to cold metal, it starts to pull that heat out. And it looks like we have disappeared around the corner to start applying that powder, which we don't have a view of up on the screen quite yet, but yeah, we specifically have to go to the powder booth because it has some good air suction, prevents us from inhaling any of that powdered glass while we're working with it. Yeah, next time, could we have a view of the powder booth, please? And for those who just joined in, we are working on making some crackle vases in the hot shop right now. We have already started applying kind of our final layers of color. There are technically 2 layers of color inside of this piece, so when we crack the surface of the glass, we'll be able to see that second layer of color underneath. And usually we'll apply a few layers of this powdered color, kind of what you're seeing on the surface of the glass right now, just to make sure that it's rich enough and we can't really see through it. And we're continuing to use the block, which is this wooden spoon-shaped tool that's been completely saturated in water before we used it. And this is mostly just to smooth and round out this shape again, and it makes sure that the bubble blows out evenly from within all of this glass as well, because it evens out the shape and the heat. And with all this shaping, this is telling me that we might see them crack the surface of the glass pretty soon. And this happens really quickly, so I'll point out that we crack the glass, of course, by dunking it in water and thermally shocking it. So that green bucket that we have laid out on the floor, you can kind of see up on the screen, is what we'll use. And this is done a couple of times to make those initial cracks and then allow that water to seep into those cracks and go a little bit deeper into the glass. And now that we have that done, we immediately start expanding the bubble inside. So this is going to, of course, expand the glass underneath that cooled down layer, which will reveal these cracks in the glass. So this is when we'll start heating it up and really start shaping it and working with it. And the shape that we're going for is a sort of cone shape. It'll be wider at the bottom, smaller at the top. It'll have a little bit of a flare out right at the opening, and that's pretty much it. And this is pretty quick. I mean, once we have all the color and patterning, then we just start blowing it out and shaping it. These pieces each take seeming about 30 minutes, especially once they get into the flow of things. So we're using a wooden paddle along the side of the piece, and this is mostly just to apply even pressure across the side of the piece at the same time as we slowly expand it. Also, these torches run around the same temperature as the furnaces themselves, between 21 and 2300 degrees Fahrenheit. But we have to use these torches to heat up just a section of glass at a time, so we're focusing the heat near the pipe this time. And you'll see why in just a second, but this is where we create kind of our breaking point. So we go in with the jacks, these two metal blades, and we're squeezing down near the pipe. This is creating a divot in the glass, or a line called the jack line. And this is where we break the piece off the pipe later on. Also, this setup in the front here, this is just a wooden board laid out with a little bit of wet newspaper on top. And this is both to kind of protect the wood of the board and also to create a layer of steam, which will help shape the glass. And it's to apply even pressure to the entire side of the piece at the same time. So we use it to create cylinders and cones, just anything that needs a perfectly straight, symmetrical wall. And next we've heated up mostly just the bottom of the piece. We're going in with a wooden paddle and we're completely flattening the bottom. Of course, just giving the piece a flat surface to rest on, such as a table. So now we've finished the lower half of the piece. Our next big step is attaching another pipe to the center of the bottom, and then we'll completely break this piece off of the pipe it's on now. And yeah, for those who just joined in, I'm sure you can already kind of see the shape taking place, but we're making a vase right now, and this vase has kind of an overall cone shape. It'll be flared out a little bit at the opening, but that's pretty much it. Yeah, the special thing about this piece is the crackling effect, which we physically cracked the surface of the glass using water and then kind of expanded the rest of the glass underneath. So we used a piece of broken glass to mark the center of the bottom, just giving ourselves a target. And then it brought the punty over. The punty is basically just this second pipe. We're using it as another attachment point. And once that connection is set up and it's not moving so much, then we go ahead and apply some water to the divot that we created earlier, the jack line. This is cracking the glass enough to where we tap the pipe and it just pops right off. So now we start working on the upper half of the piece. We'll probably straighten the walls a little bit. There's always some thickness kind of remaining around the opening of the piece, so they'll usually trim some glass off or cut it off. So we've applied a bunch of heat just to the front of the piece. We're going in with some tweezers. We're pulling more than we're pinching right here. We're just trying to stretch out this glass a little bit right around the opening. And then we'll go in with some shears next, which are kind of like glass scissors, and we cut all of that excess glass away that we just pulled out. So this is getting rid of any thickness, any unevenness, and also getting rid of kind of those windows of clear that some of you might have noticed. The color didn't go quite all the way to the end of the piece. Now it does. And now they'll go in with the jacks, those two metal blades. And we're first winding it to its full size or full width. And the next couple of motions will probably be just worrying about how symmetrical the piece is. And then kind of as a final step, they flare the opening out. And yeah, for those who are just joining in, once again, we're working on making some crackle vases. This has come along pretty far already, so we're just kind of finishing this one off. But we're continuously making these all the way until the museum is closed. So if you miss the beginning of the process, feel free to stick around. So we've just flared the opening out a little bit, which means this piece is finished. Now we'll just start getting it ready to break off of the pipe. When we do break it off the pipe, we'll torch the bottom, stamp it with the Museum of Glass logo, and then we'll set it aside to cool down inside of the annealer on the left wall, so that large black box over there. And by cool down, some people expect that box to be cold, but we have to make sure the glass stays warm until we're ready to slowly cool it. So that box is sitting at just about 900 degrees Fahrenheit right now. We're applying a little bit of water to the very end of the pipe, just cracking that connection enough to pop it off. And once again, we're just using that torch to melt the bottom enough to stamp it with the Museum of Glass logo. And just like that, this piece is done. Let's give them a round of applause for finishing yet another vase. Thank you. All right, so yeah, this is the annealer. We're putting all of the pieces that we make in there today, and then at the end of the day, we just press a button, and it's programmed to very slowly cool for about 12 hours. So we won't see those pieces again until tomorrow. And yeah, we're just continuing to make these crackle vases, but we are seeing a variety of colors. So we'll see that process starting over on the left bench again. And feel free to ask any questions if you guys have any so far. So this is all going to start with the coloring process. And this color that we apply right now, this is of course the base layer, so it's the one that you're seeing through the cracks on the surface. Yeah, could we have a view of the left bench, please, as they go through this process? Yeah, perfect, thank you. So this all starts with just a single small bubble of clear glass on the end of a pipe, which Trent is preparing right now. And Sarah is melting down some colored glass. Now, we don't make colored glass here in the hot shop ourselves. We instead get it shipped in bar form. And I wish I had some examples for you all, but it's a relatively thick piece of color shipped in literally in a rod or a bar, and we'll just take sections of it, attach it to the end of our pipe using a little bit of clear glass as kind of a connection point, and then we'll completely melt it down and use it. So we've just brought that molten color over, and this is quite literally dropped on top of that clear bubble. And then we'll go through the process of pushing and rolling this color back until it completely covers up that clear in an even layer. So this is the same process that's used for any blown glass that appears to be all made from color. Colored glass is pretty expensive, so usually it's just this paper thin layer kind of sandwiched between layers of clear. And you'll see that happen in here too. We'll gather layers of clear over top of this. So now we've rolled that color fully back. We're just cooling the pipe right now. This is a pipe cooler, kind of a trough of water that we set the pipe down into. And we'll let this sit, kind of let the air just suck the heat out, and then eventually we'll gather 2 layers of clear over top of this. And then eventually we'll start applying a second color to the surface of the glass in the form of powder this time. This is how we get our 2 layers of color. And of course, these layers of clear, this is partially to build up mass, but it's also creating a layer of separation between the 2 colored layers. So we're just cracking the surface color, not all the way through. Also, this pad that Trent just used for a moment there, this is just folded up newspaper soaked with water. Sometimes they're not even properly soaked all the way through. But yeah, this is as close as we get to using our hands to shape the glasses, the newspapers. So we've just now started applying our powdered layers of colored glass. Yes, same material as the solid layer of color, just crushed up into a fine material instead. And yeah, usually we'll apply multiple layers of this powdered color just to make sure that it's pretty rich, saturated, you can't really see through it. And welcome into the hot shop. We are working on making some crackle vases, and the first step that we need to do is create our 2 layers of color. So we have 1 layer of color underneath some other layers of clear glass, and we're just now applying our 2nd layer of color on the surface of the glass. And we're going to crack the surface, which will reveal that 2nd layer underneath. It's a really satisfying process, and we've just started, so you'll get to see everything all the way through. Yeah, so basically just a swirling ball of fire, yeah. It's just really hot in there, maybe about 21 to 2300 degrees Fahrenheit. Usually keep it just about in the middle at 22-ish. Yeah, I work with glass. But these guys, they've been working with glass for a really long time, which is why they make everything look super easy. Yeah, technically if we were to just stay in there, the glass would get hot enough that it could start dripping off of the pipe. And that is why it's so important to watch kind of how the glass is moving. And that tells you how hot it is, how malleable it is. And then we come back out. Meanwhile, we do actually have our glass furnaces, which purposefully have molten material sitting inside of them, which those are the tanks with the closed doors specifically. We do have 2 of them. And yeah, there's a giant ceramic crucible in there holding a pool of clear molten glass. It's really satisfying. The way that we get it on our pipes is we kind of pick it up like honey. We just roll the pipe inside of it. So it looks like that was the last layer of color we needed. So we'll start heating this up and getting it ready to dunk into the bucket of water, which is what we use to crack the surface of the glass. And that's of course the green bucket that's sitting on the floor. Luckily we have a pretty good view of it up on the screen. And of course that nozzle we just briefly used, this is blowing some compressed air. And we were using it to cool the glass, kind of like blowing on a hot piece of food. And we're continuing to use the block, which this is mostly to even out the shape and make sure the bubble blows out evenly from within all this glass, which we do already have a bubble, we just can't see it underneath that layer of color. So this glass is usually dunked at least 2, if not 3 times into the water. That first dunk crackles the surface, and then the second, third, it starts to kind of penetrate into those original cracks. And this is when they start to rapidly expand the glass. And this is, of course, going to move only the glass under the surface. The surface is staying pretty solid, and therefore it's creating these very visible cracks across the surface of the piece. And now that we have our pattern, we're able to start blowing it out and turning it into our vase. Things move pretty quick from here. We'll create the lower half of the vase first, and then we'll kind of flip the orientation work on the upper half of the vase. So to start our shape, we want kind of this elongated cone shape. So we're going to be stretching this glass out quite a bit. And of course, to do this, we're using gravity as a tool. So we heated it up a couple times. We hung it down towards the floor, and gravity stretched it out. And this is when we start to blow it out a little bit more. So Ben is using a wooden paddle on the side of the piece, just applying a little bit of pressure, making sure things stay symmetrical and straight. And immediately we start creating the jack line. So these two metal blades, these are the jacks. And we're squeezing into the glass right next to the pipe. This is where we'll break the piece off of the pipe later on. We're creating a divot right now. And now you can see the pattern a lot better too, of course. And then we have a little bit of a close-up. And yeah, we still have quite a bit of blowing and shaping to do, but we're getting there. I would say each of these pieces takes maybe about 30 minutes. Yeah, fully from start to finish. Yeah, these guys, they've been working with glass for quite a while, so they make it look really easy, really fast, but it's all those years of experience that are allowing them to do that. Oh yeah, and the setup in the front, by the way, we use this to apply even pressure along the entire piece at the same time, so it helps create really straight and really symmetrical objects. There's not a lot of other tools that we can use that do that same thing. So next we're flattening the bottom of the piece using just a wooden paddle. We're keeping the jacks on the side of the piece to hopefully push the glass into a nice crisp corner on the bottom. And just like that, we have created the lower half of our piece. So we'll leave this basically alone, won't touch it too much from here. We'll bring over another pipe and attach it to the center of the bottom of the piece, and then we'll completely break this piece off of the pipe it's on now. So we've just brought that second pipe over. This is attached just to the center at the bottom. We'll let this connection set up so it's not moving too much. And then we will apply a little bit of water to that divot we created earlier. That water is going to crack that connection enough for the piece to pop right off. So we pick up the water with the tweezers. Yeah, once again, this is causing thermal shock when that water touches the glass. Same idea as getting those crackles in the glass. And now we can start working on the upper half of our vase. So we'll go inside of the piece. We'll probably open it up a little bit more from here. And then, woohoo. Okay, so it looks like the bottom actually broke away. There's a hole into the bottom of the piece now, which is too bad, but things like that happen. So we will have to start a new one. I don't think they noticed, Ben. Could we actually play the powder video? This is something that these guys missed.
Powder is the smallest size of colored glass available and can be very versatile when used in the creation of artwork. Powder is made by crushing frit in a ball mill. When used like frit, the powder is rolled through, and the heat of the gather is enough to melt the color onto the surface. Powder can also be sifted onto the outside of a bubble or gather to create various densities of pigmentation and shading. The application of different color powders can create both abstract designs and naturalistic color patterns, such as the skin of animals. Powder can be melted smooth or left dry and cakey on the surface of the piece.
Yeah, so I know a lot of you guys joined in just before that piece fell on the floor, but we'll see that entire process from the beginning. And the reason I played that powder video for the newcomers is because we're going to be using powdered colored glass on the surface of the piece, and that is what we will be cracking to reveal the layer of color underneath of that. So this first layer of color we're creating now, this is, of course, going to be underneath that crackling. So we're back to the beginning. We have our small clear bubble, and we're melting down some solid colored glass that originated from something called Color Bar that we get shipped in. So we've completely melted that color enough to drop it on top of the clear bubble. We'll go through the process of pushing and rolling this color back until it completely covers up that clear. And I just want to mention again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to just let me know at any point. So we've just gathered another layer of clear, and we're letting some of this glass fall off and drip off into a bucket. This bucket is specifically clear glass only, so we'll eventually be able to just crush all that up and throw it back into the furnace and completely reuse that glass, which is really nice. Yeah, welcome into the hot shop. I think you guys were in here earlier, weren't you? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so we're just continuing to make those vases. We've gotten pretty far with this one right here. We're getting ready to dunk it in the water. It's usually done 2 or 3 times just to make sure that those cracks penetrate relatively deep into the surface. And we'll start to blow this out, which will reveal that second color that we have underneath. Yeah, we'll usually start the projects on the side benches and then we'll move over to the center bench once we're ready to blow it out. So now you'll see the shaping taking place. Yeah, that area right here is usually the best. Of course, we used gravity to stretch the glass out into that longer shape, but we also spun the pipe a little bit. And this is creating a centrifugal force, kind of an outward pulling force with that motion, and stretching it out a little bit further than if we were to just use gravity. So I always describe that answer kind of like learning how to ride a bike. You do mess up a little bit in the beginning, and I'm sure these guys have burned themselves every once in a great while, but as you get more and more used to being around the glass, you don't touch certain things on accident anymore. So the glass, when it looks solid in the hot shop, it's sitting at just about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And when it is malleable, we don't usually have it completely molten when we're working with it, but when it's the texture of honey, it's at just about 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's always kind of somewhere in the middle when we're working with it in the hot shop. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Working with glass is not very common. It's not super accessible because it's so expensive to have a hot shop. But usually what glass artists do is they'll rent out time in a hot shop, such as a place like this, or they kind of know someone who has one. But yeah, it's really hard to be able to make your own stuff. These guys are making store items, and they don't very often get to make their own stuff. So we've been keeping this piece of glass just warm enough for it to not break. It's pretty solid at this moment, just about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And we've brought over another pipe, attached it right to the center of the bottom of the piece. And of course, this allows us to break the piece off from its original pipe by applying a little bit of water, causing some thermal shock, and tapping the pipe, which sends a vibration to that small cracking. And so now we'll be able to finish up the top of the vase, and this usually includes trimming a little bit of the glass away from around the opening, and then they will flare the opening outward as well. Yeah, I always point out whenever people ask if they want to take photos or videos that we live stream everything that we make in the hot shop basically all day, every day, whenever the museum is open. And on top of that, um, since we do that, you guys can go back and you can watch previous days if you're curious about any other artists' work or just seeing different work in general. Yeah, they're all just saved on the museum's YouTube channel. So right here, we used a pair of tweezers. We pulled the opening outward, mostly just kind of stretching that glass out. And then we trimmed all of that glass off with a pair of shears, kind of like glass scissors. And this leaves us with a much thinner opening, much more even opening, and it also makes sure that all the colors and patterning goes right to the very end of the piece. And the next step then goes inside of the piece with the jacks and flares the opening out. So now we have basically kind of this disc-like shape for the opening of the piece. And that has pretty much finished the piece off, so we'll get ready to break it off and put it away from here. So to completely finish this off, this is stamped with the Museum of Glass logo. And then this is brought over to the annealer over on the left wall where it will slowly cool for about 12 hours. Yeah, that box, despite how I said cooling, it's sitting at just about 900 degrees Fahrenheit at this moment, and it'll cool down very slowly from that temperature. And yeah, we won't see that piece again until tomorrow. So each of these pieces are turning out different colors for both the surface and the layer of color underneath. In this one, it looks like it might have been a red. Some reds, they turn brown, black, gray when you're working with them in the hot shop, and they only start to come back when they come down towards room temperature. Even when it's solid at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, it's still that weird color. You can only tell whenever they were going in and out of the furnace, you might have been able to see the light shining through the glass, and you might have seen a little bit of that color. That's the only way you can tell.